we'll start perhaps by taking a look at traditional electronics files, at the Gerber and Exelon files. And we'll kick off by really getting to grips with the underlying function of the system. So what you see here is our sacrificial substrate. So this is what you print onto, but it's not part of your final print. What you can see here is the beginning of the print process. You'll see that there's an electronic circuit beginning to take shape. And this will essentially be the starting point of your print. This here happens to be the initial print with the silver material, but it's also obviously necessary to add the polymer material in addition. And obviously, as one builds up this metal, you can create parts that are full of dense metal or with the shaped polymer. So this is essentially how you'll start off your print. But what's perhaps more important to understand is how do I actually make my PCB, my generic, my planar electronics? What you see here, this PCB, but you see that you have planes of silver, you have circuitry, and this is the underside of your board. So if you imagine how this is printed, the substrate we showed you earlier, it will print as follows from the substrate. That's the underside of your print. And the print heads will pass each time adding thin layers of polymer and thin layers of silver. And this part essentially grows from the bottom. The final result is a much thicker part. So in my right hand, you will see a part which is about 1.5 PCB layers. And in my left hand is the same part after a few more hours of printing, where the full 4-layer object has been completed. Another example that I'd like to share with you here is the ability, of course, to essentially to daisy chain vias. So one of the things that people ask us often is, how many vias can I print? Well, the answer is as many as you like, and also between whichever layers that you like. And here you have a series of many, many vias in order to essentially test or replicate the complexity that one would expect to get from a normal manufacturing process. And this, whilst it's only a 2-layer board, obviously contains a very high density of interconnects in a relatively small space. Another one of the advantages that people perhaps aren't aware of with additive manufacturing is the ease with which different route layers are supported. So what's the shape of the PCB? Now, you don't have to worry about difficult sensitivities to V-cut shapes and so on. The board is printed with exactly the shape that you wish. So that if one's interested in a circular route, if one's interested in a jagged route, or really any route layer shaping at all, for the printer this is very, very easy. And you then also receive the complete part in whichever shape you like once the print is done. Simply remove it from that initial substrate. Complexity, as is the mantra in 3D printing, is essentially free. There's no cost to additional process steps because there is just the one step of printing. So this means that even more complicated boards, such as the one I have here, it's a 12-layer board, essentially doesn't require any more work of the printer. There's no more setup. There's no more requirement to focus on this kind of a print than there is on the simpler ones we've just seen. So essentially, once you've set up your print job, you're able to go ahead, and here you'll see the printing of planes, the printing of through holes, the printing of vias, the printing of some micro vias even, essentially facilitating an overnight print of what is a very complex part. The rule of thumb in industry is that you can expect to wait at least a day per layer of your PCB, depending on your location. And the ability to print a full 12-layer board overnight is, of course, a dramatic improvement in cycle times. And as one starts dealing with more and more complex parts, then the advantage of additive manufacturing really comes to the fore. And the ability to make things that would otherwise take a great deal of time is actually something that you have inside, in-house, and is something you can achieve in a very, very short period of time.